Beautiful Scarred Soul, Chapter 3, by Ohbear. The air remained comfortable between them, much to Sangwoo's surprise. Sparsely he'd feel that familiar tension between them, where he could feel his carnal urges sparking back to life and he'd have to swallow down his pride like the sticky toxin it is. He felt indebted, a feeling he despised with every waking nerve of his body. He had to even the score, and make it so he no longer harboured favour to Bum. The task was simple: do something nice for him. It was easy, really. Finding something to appease Bum was actually the simplest task he'd been faced with as of late. He got home from the store around noon, quickly gathering the groceries in his arms and sliding from the car to head to his house. He walks in with his head held high, a grin plastered across his face as he strides into the kitchen and announces his presence with a warm call of, "Come see me." Sangwoo places the grocery bags on the table and whirling around on his feet to see the inching figure of Bum crawling towards him. Sangwoo chuckles, his voice a rumbling cascade of excitement as he leans down to scoop up Bum and place him atop the table. "Hey," he begins, leaning forward to press his forehead against Bum's, ignoring the sensation of sweaty palms desperately pawing at the taut muscles of his shoulder blades. The other male's hands skittishly cling to Sangwoo's body. "I got you something. I think you'll like it." Watching with keen eyes, Sangwoo shifts to grab the item from behind the older, and he presents it. A low purr of thunderous excitement boils inside his chest at the sight of Bum's face becoming blotchy and flushed in his excitement. Truly hideous. "A chocolate bar." Sangwoo simply nods, a satisfied grin splaying across his features. He no longer needs to speak. He just needs to prompt Bum's hand to unravel the foil from the sweet. Watching Bum's lips part in anticipation, Sangwoo breathes out a pleased bout of laughter. Before leaning forward and flicking his tongue across the corner of the chocolate bar. He simply hums as he rolls the thin layer of chocolate on his tongue across the roof of his mouth. "I want you to guess what flavour it is, okay?" Bum nods, and Sangwoo sinks his teeth into the corner of the bar, taking off a section and sealing his lips around it. Moments later, his hand is ghosting along the length of Bum's torso, feeling the dips and curves through the fabric of the tight shirt, until his fingertip touches the older male's jaw. Sangwoo slowly prompts his chin upwards, seconds later pressing his lips against the others and allowing for Bum to taste the sweet chocolate on his tongue. A kiss so tender, Sangwoo's hand slowly sliding around the curve of Bum's neck to rest on the nape and urge him closer, which is blissfully accepted with the younger man's hands curling into the fabric covering the former's broad chest. When they part, there's nothing but the silence and the soft, rapid exhales escaping Bum's lips. Sangwoo breaks off another piece of the chocolate in between his index finger and thumb, rolling it between the two callous digits. His body heat and the friction of his fingers swiftly begin to melt the treat, and he lifts his hand to offer to Bum, who eagerly takes Sangwoo's index finger into his mouth to lave his tongue around his skin. Sangwoo revels in the soft caress of Bum's mouth, and he decides to personally indulge and connect his lips to the expanse of Bum's throat, branding him, claiming what belonged to him. Sangwoo's free hand runs along the fabric of Bum's skirt, and he keens silently at the sensation of the other man shivering beneath his touch, cheeks hollowing to suckle any traces of chocolate from his finger. In his head, Sangwoo digs his fingers into the imprints of Bum's records, pulls them back, and allows for the same noise to play over and over again. It's Bum's last breath, his first breath, the soft hitching along his tongue that Sangwoo is so keenly fond of. Every little crack in his skull that his gasps and moans seep through the marrow and corrode at his mentality like a rotten disease that Bum is corrupted with. The same vile sickness that Sangwoo had too. And he can hear this illness, loud and prideful as he traces his tongue along the imprints of his teeth that he had carved into Bum's skin. Sangwoo allows for the symphony of huffs and last breaths and breaths-to-be to congregate and slip into his bones where they can only fuel his desires with both of his hands digging violent chroma of mauve into Bum's hips. He knows every colour of Bum's body, and he knows that this is killing Bum, that it has been killing Bum from the first moment their lips met, despite the disgusting circumstances. Sangwoo has always found beauty in death, Bum's death. No matter how philosophical, is all that is on his mind as he ravishes every inch of the other male's neck that he is given. Given because this is a gift, a compensation for the chocolate residue snugly fid into the crevices of his fingernails. He parts from Bum, breathless and eyes blown wide with something akin to desire, as he devours Bum's body with wild eyes. He can recall the way his mother looked pinned under his father. He can recall the thrashing limbs and soft, snuffed-out cries. It runs his blood cold before igniting it and turning it to magma, his skin becoming flushed. He wasn't ready. Not yet. Sangwoo knew it would take time, but it was difficult when he was aching and currently rudding his hips against the edge of the table, needy and wanting. He was almost as lewd and as disgusting as Bum, who was feebly arcing his spine and pressing his groin against Sangwoo's abdomen. No matter how much he hates it, no matter how much he can picture someone else under him, it's irreversibly noticeable that Bum is a male, and for the first time in their relationship, Sangwoo is in the dark. and he hates the dark. But for some wicked reason, he's overjoyed and thrilled to see Bum shivering and gasping under him like a harlot. Sangwoo can thank his skills regarding foreplay, and he knows exactly how he's going to make this work. Bum. He growls, gritting his teeth as he leans down to press a bruising kiss on the other's lips, flicking his tongue across the bite marks residing on the innermost part of his bottom lip. His thumbs dig deeper into Bum's hips, as if he wanted nothing more than to shatter his pelvis in his hands and rip the bone shards out. The smaller male has no chance to respond, as Sangwoo swiftly flips Bum onto his abdomen against the table. His hands fly to the edges of the skirt, bundling the fabric up to bunch up around Bum's hips. Sangwoo's hands curl tight into the fabric, as he lewdly ruts his hips against Bum's behind. Bum is shivering, repeating, "Sangwoo, please, Sangwoo," in haphazard pleads with his feet arcing in his attempts to reach the floor. His pursuits ultimately failing, for every time his toe grazed the wooded floor, Sangwoo would yank him up by the groin and bite Bum's neck. The friction was too good, and he knew with well intentions that Bum was struggling to keep up with Sangwoo's pace. Perhaps it was a bit malignant what he was doing, taunting and teasing and destroying Bum with each violent roll of his hips against the others. His lips sealed tight as if to silence himself, to listen to the threads of his name spilling past Bum's lips, attempting to sew the air and tie them together. It was a bad attempt, really, especially with Sangwoo already set on a plan that he was swiftly reaching the goal to. He was well aware that this aggressive prodding would be enough to please Bum and for himself to escape narrowly from the tension he knew would come if he were to ever take a step further. Breaking yet another piece of chocolate bar off, Sangwoo hitches Bum's shirt up to the shoulder blades and begins to draw formless shapes across the expanse of his back, smoothing it against the dip of his spine and letting out a sharp hiss of pleasure when Bum attempts to rub back against Sangwoo's hand. It takes ephemeral time for him to take action, leaning over and laving his tongue across the melted sweet, occasionally pausing to suckle on tender flesh. This stimulation has Bum sobbing out soft pleads laced with Sangwoo's name, and he finds it so endearingly vile that he wants to do nothing more than to rip Bum apart to see what's ticking in his head. He knows that it's over and that he's won when Bum stops forcing his voice raw, and instead trades it for small breathless gasps and huffs. Sangwoo pulls away, allowing for the skirt to tumble back down Bum's hips and shield his eyes from the viscous liquid smattered on the edge of the table. "You did well. Go clean yourself up." "Sangwoo, wait," Bum whispers softly, attempting to reach the floor to gain stability. I can take care of you too." Sangwoo can't help but let out a sharp bark of laughter, and click his tongue in what could be considered vague annoyance. "Don't. You've done enough." Really, he had no blisteringly obvious reason to be agitated, but he couldn't help it. He treads into his room and shuts the door, sinking into the sheets of his makeshift bed and his hands immediately reaching down to rub his arousal through his trousers. Sangwoo was beyond wounded. The smooth of his skin would be riddled with soft bumps, biting into his pillow and hissing sharply as he palms himself, haunches twitching and toes curling. His spine arcs. He can't help but fall over to his side and pant heavily against the cover of his pillow, hands stuffed helplessly down his boxers, which are soon discarded in a haze of foresight. It's over, and his damp undergarments are across the room where he threw them. Sangwoo peers groggily up at the ceiling, forgetting how and when the blankets got over his body. Nothing connects, nothing is tangible, and he's afraid that if he were to touch his own body, he'd scorch his skin. Pretending he's safe to touch, that he's safe to love, that he's not going to drag anyone down with him. He wanted that more than anything, and it's becoming increasingly more difficult with laboured breath to decipher if he's dreaming or not. That is, until he hears a knock against the door. Pinpoints of static race up his spine and settle like embers on the nape of his neck, sweltering and uncomfortable as he bolts up his head. His name was being called, wasn't it? Sangwoo catches his bottom lip between his teeth, digging his canines down into the soft surface. He curls his hand tight in the blankets, watching the door with wide eyes, as if he were nothing more than a wolf caught in a bear trap. He can hear the knob of the door turning, and the pressure in his eyes becoming too much. She's never opened the door before in his dreams. He can feel his vision blurring, as if he were seeing the world from behind freshly cut grass. Sangwoo is horrified, and he brings his hands up to wipe at his dampening eyes, pressing the heel of his palms into his sockets and rubbing until he can see nothing but white. But his vision refocuses. He can see the door opening, and when he catches sight of raven black hair and thin, awkward legs, he knows he's made a mistake. What do people who've lost everything dream of? Do they even dream